There are corners of Hogwarts that most students pass without noticing, not because they are hidden by spells or guarded by warnings, but because they exist quietly without asking for attention. This story begins with one such place, a simple stone bench tucked along a lesser used corridor, smoothed by centuries of air and time, and yet never truly claimed by anyone. It is a bench no student ever sat on, not out of fear or rule breaking, but because it seemed to belong to something gentler, something waiting. Tonight's tale is not about danger or daring adventures. It is about listening, about the quiet magic that lingers when footsteps fade and the castle settles into rest. The bench has watched generations of students hurry past with books clutched tight, robes swishing, laughter echoing and then disappearing around corners. And still, it waits, patient, calm, as though it knows its moment will come only when the castle itself grows sleepy. We begin on a late evening at Hogwarts, when the sky outside the tall windows has deepened into a soft wash of indigo and silver. Lanterns glow along the corridors, their light warm and steady, casting gentle halos on ancient stone walls. The air hums faintly with magic, not the sharp crackle of spells, but a low, comforting presence, like a breath drawn slowly and released. Somewhere far away, a staircase shifts with a sigh, settling into a new position for the night. The corridor where the bench rests lies just beyond the busier paths. Here, the sounds are softer. Footsteps fade quickly, voices drop to whispers, and even the portraits seem less inclined to chatter. The bench itself is carved from pale stone, cool to the touch, its surface worn smooth by time rather than use. A narrow window above it lets in moonlight, which drifts across the floor like a silver blanket, touching the bench and lingering there a moment longer than anywhere else. As you listen, allow yourself to slow down. Imagine walking these corridors after curfew, not with worry, but with ease. Imagine the gentle echo of your own steps, the way the castle feels alive, yet deeply calm around you. If you enjoy stories like this, quiet journeys through forgotten corners, you're always welcome to return, to rest here again among soft magic and sleepy halls. For now, let the castle guide you. Let the bench wait. Tonight, Hogwarts has a story to tell, and it begins not with a spell, but with stillness. On this particular evening, the castle was not entirely alone. Moving softly through the quieter corridors were three familiar figures, their steps unhurried, their voices kept low out of habit rather than fear. Harry Potter walked at the center, his wand tucked loosely into his hand, not raised for defense, but simply present, an old comfort he rarely thought about anymore. There was a calm to him tonight, the kind that came after long days when nothing demanded heroics, only rest. Beside him was Hermione Granger, her arms folded gently around a slim book she had meant to return to the library hours ago. She had always loved Hogwarts at night. Without classes and crowds, the castle seemed more honest to her, its magic less performative, more thoughtful. Her eyes wandered over the stonework as they walked, noting details she had passed 100 times before, yet somehow never truly seen. Even now, curiosity lived quietly within her, softened by the hour. Ron Weasley trailed just a bit onto Saul, stepped behind, hands tucked into his robe sleeves, his expression relaxed in a way it rarely was during the day. He had complained earlier about being tired, about missing the warmth of the common room fire, but there was something about these late walks that always drew him along. Hogwarts felt different at night, less intimidating, more like an old friend who had finally settled down to sleep. They had not set out with a destination in mind. That was the beauty of it. After curfew, the castle seemed to offer itself differently, corridors opening not just physically, but emotionally. Even Ron, who usually preferred the obvious comforts of food and fire, felt the ease of wandering without purpose. As they turned into a lesser-used hallway, their pace slowed almost without thought. The air here felt cooler, quieter. Hermione noticed it first, the way sound seemed to soften, as if the corridor itself was listening. Harry felt it too, though he could not have explained why. It reminded him faintly of standing at the edge of the Black Lake at night, when the world seemed larger and yet safer all at once. Ron broke the silence with a quiet murmur, not quite a joke, not quite a question. Do you ever notice how some places at Hogwarts feel like they're waiting? Hermione smiled faintly at that, not answering right away. She understood exactly what he meant. Hogwarts was full of rooms and corners that existed beyond timetables and maps. Places that didn't announce themselves. Places that waited for the right kind of attention. Harry's gaze drifted ahead toward a pale shape along the wall, a stone bench resting beneath a narrow window. He had walked past it before. They all had. Yet tonight, it felt different, as if it had gently stepped forward from the background of the castle's endless details. None of them said it aloud, but each felt the same subtle pull, a quiet invitation rather than a call. They were not chosen by destiny, nor driven by urgency. They were simply present, open, and calm enough to notice. And so, without realizing it, Harry, Hermione, and Ron slowed even more, their footsteps softening as they approached the bench no student ever sat on, unaware that their simple attention was already beginning to wake a very old, very gentle kind of magic. The stone bed sat quietly beneath the narrow window, exactly as it always had, unadorned, slightly worn at the edges, and blending so naturally into the wall that most students passed it without a second thought. And yet, tonight, it felt as though the corridor itself had paused to acknowledge it. Harry stopped walking without quite meaning to. Hermione and Ron took another step before noticing, then halted beside him. For a moment, none of them spoke. The silence here was different from the hush of the library or the stillness after snowfall. This silence felt attentive, as though the stones were aware of their presence and had gently leaned closer. "Funny place for a bench," Ron said softly at last, his voice echoing less than it should have. "It's not exactly convenient." Hermione nodded, her gaze tracing the curve of the stone seat. "I don't remember anyone ever sitting here," she said, thoughtful rather than puzzled. "Not once. And I've walked this corridor countless times." Harry didn't answer. His attention had drifted upward to the narrow window above the bench. It was tall and thin, set deep into the wall, its glass faintly clouded with age. Ordinarily, it would have shown the familiar night sky, stars scattered over the dark outline of the grounds, perhaps the moon hanging low above the trees. But tonight, it didn't. Instead of stars, the window glowed with a soft silvery light, as though dawn were rising somewhere it shouldn't. The color was gentle, not bright enough to hurt the eyes, yet undeniably wrong for this hour. Ron squinted. Is it just me? Or does that window look odd? Hermione's breath caught slightly as she stepped closer. That's not the night sky, she whispered. It's not any sky I recognize. Harry felt a faint warmth spread through his chest. Not alarm, not excitement, just a quiet sense of recognition. Hogwarts had always had its secrets, but this felt different. From hidden chambers or enchanted staircases, this felt patient. The light beyond the glass shifted slowly, like clouds drifting across a pale horizon. Shapes moved there, indistinct but calm, as if the world on the other side existed at a slower pace. Hermione raised her wand, not defensively, but out of instinct. Lumos, she murmured. The tip of her wand glowed, but its light seemed strangely unnecessary. The window's glow remained steady, unbothered, as though acknowledging the wand, but politely declining its help. Harry reached out without thinking, his fingers brushing the stone beneath the window. It was warmer than the surrounding wall, not hot, just gently warm, like stone that had been sitting in sunlight earlier in the day. At that exact moment, the corridor changed. It wasn't dramatic. No grinding of stone, no sudden gust of wind. Instead, the air seemed to soften, thickening just enough to make every movement feel slower, more deliberate. The faint echoes of distant corridors faded away until there was nothing but their breathing and the quiet hum of magic that seemed to rise from the walls themselves. Ron swallowed. "I've got a strange feeling," he said quietly, "like we're not late anymore, or early, or anything." Hermione understood immediately. Time, here, felt less important, not frozen, simply unobserved. The window brightened slightly, and for a brief, gentle moment, the glass became clear. What they saw was not the Hogwarts grounds. Beyond the window stretched a sky washed in soft lavender and pale gold, as if twilight and dawn had decided to share the same moment. There were no sharp edges, no harsh shadows. Everything beyond the glass seemed calm, vast, and unhurried. Below the sky, faint outlines of rooftops appeared, old, unfamiliar, yet undeniably magical. Towers that did not belong to the present castle, arches shaped differently, banners hanging in colors that felt older than the houses they knew. Hermione gasped softly. "Harry, that looks like—" "Hogwarts," Harry finished, though the word felt incomplete, but not ours. Ron tilted his head. "You mean before?" Hermione shook her head slowly. "Not exactly. It doesn't feel like the past or the future." The window dimmed again, returning to its soft, silvery glow, as though it had shown them only what they were ready to glimpse. The corridor's air loosened, just a little, allowing sound to return. Faint creaks of the castle settling, distant murmurs from somewhere far away. Harry lowered his hand, realizing only then that his heart was beating a bit faster, not with fear, but with quiet wonder. That window, Hermione said carefully, isn't just showing a place, it's showing a moment. Ron frowned, then shrugged. Right, of course it is, because that makes perfect sense. Hermione smiled faintly at him. Moments leave traces, she continued, especially in a place like Hogwarts. Maybe this corridor remembers something. As if in response, the bench beneath the window gave a subtle vibration, so slight it could have been imagined. Harry felt it through the soles of his shoes, a gentle acknowledgement rather than a summons. Slowly, almost reverently, he sat down. The stone was smooth and warm, fitting him comfortably, as though it had always been meant for this exact purpose. Nothing dramatic happened, no flash of light, no sudden rush of memories. Instead, a feeling settled over him, a deep, steady calm, like sinking into still water. Ron and Hermione watched him closely. "Well?" Ron asked. Harry considered the question, searching for the right words. "It feels safe," he said at last. "Like this bench isn't meant for resting your body. It's meant for resting everything else." Hermione sat beside him, her movements careful, respectful. The bench adjusted subtly, making room without shifting shape. Ron hesitated only a moment longer before joining them, letting out a quiet breath as he sat. The corridor responded. The light from the window softened further, spreading gently across the stone floor. The walls seemed to exhale, releasing a faint shimmer that settled like dust motes in the air. Each particle glowed briefly before fading, leaving behind a sense of quiet completion. Images began to surface, not visions imposed upon them, but impressions that drifted through their thoughts like half-remembered dreams. They sensed students who had once passed this corridor when Hogwarts was new, young witches and wizards overwhelmed by learning, by homesickness, by the weight of magic they barely understood. None of them had sat here, not because they were forbidden, but because they were never ready. This bench, seemed, was not for bodies in need of rest, but for hearts ready to listen. Hermione felt it too, a gentle understanding that this place existed for those moments when the castle itself wished to be remembered, not studied, not solved, simply acknowledged. Ron leaned back slightly, staring at the ceiling. "I think," he said slowly, "this bench doesn't want company all the time, just sometimes." Harry nodded. "When things are quiet enough." The window's glow pulsed once, softly, like a satisfied heartbeat. Then, little by little, it dimmed, returning to the familiar dark glass, reflecting the corridor behind them. The warmth of the bench faded, though it did not grow cold. The air thinned, releasing time back into its proper place. Sounds returned fully now, the distant staircases, the whisper of tapestries shifting. They stood together, unhurried. The bench looked ordinary again. Just stone, just another forgotten detail. And yet, each of them knew something important had happened. Not a discovery meant to be shared or explained, but an invitation quietly accepted. As they walked away, Harry glanced back once. For just a heartbeat, he thought the bench looked content. The corridor returned to stillness, waiting patiently for the next moment when someone might finally notice. The corridor did not follow them when they left. That was the first thing Harry noticed as they walked away from the stone bench. Hogwarts corridors often felt alive, stairs shifting, portraits whispering, walls remembering footsteps, but this one remained perfectly still behind them, as though it had already closed its eyes again. They said very little on the way back. Ron yawned once, long and unguarded, the kind of yawn that came not from boredom, but from a deep, spreading calm. Hermione walked with her hands folded around her wand, thoughtful rather than alert. Harry moved between them, his thoughts unhurried, the warmth from the bench lingering faintly in his chest like the last glow of embers. By the time they reached the common room, the fire had burned low. A few students slept in armchairs, books slipped from their hands, while others had already gone up to their dormitories. The night felt settled, complete. And yet, Harry woke later with the unmistakable sense that something had gently tapped his thoughts. Not a sound, not a dream exactly, more like a memory trying to finish a sentence. He lay still beneath the curtains of his four-poster bed, listening. The room was quiet except for Ron's steady breathing and the soft rustle of curtains shifting with the castle's subtle movements. Moonlight traced pale lines across the floor. Then he felt it again. A pull, not urgent, not demanding, but patient. Familiar. The bench. Harry sat up slowly, careful not to disturb anyone. He didn't rush. The feeling didn't require speed. It simply waited, confident that he would understand. When he slipped from the dormitory and into the corridor, he noticed something immediately different. The castle was rearranged, not dramatically. The staircases were where they should be. The portraits hung in their frames, but the paths between places felt subtly altered, as though Hogwarts had gently nudged its own layout, smoothing certain routes, softening corners. Harry followed without thinking, turning left where he might usually go right, taking a stare that felt more like a suggestion than a command. The castle guided him not with signs, but with ease. When he reached the corridor of the bench, it was no longer empty. Soft candlelight lined the walls, candles that had not been there before, floating at even intervals, their flames steady and low. The air was warmer, filled with the faint scent of old parchment and something sweeter, like honeyed tea. Hermione was already there. She sat on the bench, hands folded in her lap, her expression calm rather than surprised. "You felt it too," Harry said quietly. She nodded. "It didn't wake me," she replied. "It invited me." Ron appeared, moments later, rubbing one eye. "Right," he muttered. "So this is happening. Good. Thought I was sleepwalking." The days that followed felt almost ordinary. Classes resumed their steady rhythm. Bells chimed softly through corridors, and the great hall filled each morning with the gentle clatter of plates and the low murmur of waking voices. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, dust motes drifting lazily in its path. To anyone watching, Hogwarts was simply being Hogwarts. And yet, Harry began to notice the pauses. They were small at first, so small they might have been missed entirely. A staircase that waited an extra second before shifting, a portrait that fell silent just as someone passed, a corridor that felt longer than it should have, stretching not in distance but in time. Hermione noticed too. She mentioned it one evening as they sat in the common room, books spread before her but unread. "Have you felt like the castle is listening more lately?" she asked quietly, glancing around to be sure no one else was paying attention. Ron shrugged, but not dismissively. "Yeah," he said, like it's thinking about something and forgot what it was. Harry didn't say anything, but his fingers tightened briefly around his mug. He knew exactly what it felt like. The sensation lingered just beneath the surface of everything, like a question that hadn't yet found the right moment to be asked. They did not return to the bench right away. There was no pull, no invitation, only a gentle awareness that the corridor still existed. Waiting, perhaps, but not impatient. Instead, the castle began to offer subtle reminders. One afternoon, as Harry walked alone from the library, he passed a corridor he was certain had been bricked up for years. Today, the stonework shimmered faintly, not enough to be obvious, but enough to make him slow his steps. The shimmer faded when he looked directly at it, leaving behind ordinary gray stone. Another evening, Hermione discovered a line of text in Hogwarts. A history that she swore had never been there before. A single sentence, tucked between paragraphs, written in ink so pale it almost blended with the page. Some spaces exist not to be used, but to be remembered. She didn't tell anyone at first. She simply closed the book and sat quietly for a long time, absorbing the weight of it. Ron's reminder came in a dream. He dreamed of walking through the great hall long after midnight, the tables gone, the ceiling dark and starless. At the center stood a single bench, stone and familiar. When he sat, the hall breathed just once, and he woke with the feeling that he had done something important without knowing why. Despite these signs, nothing demanded action. The suspense did not push, it drifted. Hogwarts seemed to be testing something, not the students, but itself, as if the castle were slowly remembering parts of its own design, tracing old thoughts, revisiting intentions laid down centuries ago. Harry noticed that students occasionally hesitated at certain corners, pausing as though expecting something to be there. A Hufflepuff girl stared down a short passage near the kitchens, brow furrowed, before shaking her head and moving on. A Ravenclaw boy lingered near a spiral stair, tapping his foot thoughtfully, then shrugged and left. No one spoke of it. That, too, felt intentional. Late one evening, as rain whispered against the windows and the common room glowed with firelight, the feeling deepened. Harry felt it while playing wizard's chess with Ron. The board went quiet mid-match, not frozen, but thoughtful. The pieces tilted slightly, as if listening for a cue that never came. Hermione looked up from her book at the same moment. "Do you feel that?" This time, the pull returned. They shared a small smile, the kind that needed no explanation. The bench was different tonight. Its surface glowed faintly, not with light, but with presence. When they sat, The stone responded immediately, warmth spreading evenly, grounding them. The window above shimmered, not bright, not dark, but alive with slow-moving color. Lavender deepened into blue, gold softened into silver, and then the corridor itself began to change. The walls grew taller, not physically, but perceptually, stretching upward as though revealing layers that had always been there. The stonework smoothed, seams fading until the walls resembled a single piece of sculpted earth. The floor beneath their feet warmed further, steady and reassuring. This time, the window did not wait. It opened, not outward, not an inward, but through. The glass became liquid smooth, then parted soundlessly, revealing a threshold of pale light. No wind rushed through. No chill followed, only stillness, deep and welcoming. Hermione's breath caught, but she did not reach for her wand. "This isn't a passage," she said softly. "It's a pause." Harry felt it too, the sense that stepping through would not take them somewhere else, but somewhere between. Ron leaned forward slightly. "Do we have to go through?" The bench warmed a little more, and with it came understanding. They didn't. The magic of this place wasn't about crossing over. It was about being present. As they sat, the view beyond the window began to shift. Not scenes, but sensations. The feeling of long tables filled with voices from centuries ago. The quiet pride of banners newly hung. The careful hope of students arriving at Hogwarts for the first time. Hearts full and hands trembling, they felt the castle listening to itself. Hermione closed her eyes, a faint smile touching her lips. "It's remembering," she whispered. "Not events, feelings." Harry felt something loosened inside him, a knot he hadn't known he carried. The castle was not asking them to solve anything, not offering a secret to guard. It was sharing something it rarely did. Loneliness. Hogwarts had always been full of people, yet it had endured countless nights alone. It had watched generations come and go, felt laughter echo and fade, held grief in its stones and joy in its halls. This bench, this corridor, it was where the castle came to rest. Ron shifted slightly. "Blimey," he murmured. "I think Hogwarts just wanted someone to sit with it." The thought settled gently among them, simple and profound. The candles along the walls dimmed one by one, not extinguishing, just lowering their flames. The window's light softened, drawing inward like a slow breath. The corridor began to return to itself. Stone seams reappeared. The floor cooled to its usual temperature. The window sealed once more into ordinary glass, reflecting only their quiet faces. But the feeling remained when they stood. The bench did not protest. It simply warmed once more, a soft farewell. As they walked back, the castle guided them again, corridors aligning effortlessly, staircases waiting patiently. Hogwarts felt lighter. At the entrance to the common room, Hermione paused. "I don't think this will happen often," she said. "Only when the castle needs it." Harry nodded. "And only if someone notices." Ron grinned sleepily. "Well, good thing we're excellent noticers." They returned to their beds, sleep coming easily, deeply. Back in the quiet corridor, the bench rested beneath its window, ordinary once more, but not forgotten. And somewhere deep within the castle, Hogwarts settled into itself, content, knowing that when it needed company again, someone might finally sit down and listen. It was not sharp or urgent. It did not demand secrecy or speed. It simply unfolded inside Harry like a door opening slowly, revealing a familiar path. The bench. They did not rush. They finished the game. Ron lost deliberately this time, though he pretended otherwise. Hermione marked her place with care. When they finally left the common room, it was not with the tension of rule breaking, but with the calm purpose of answering a knock already opened. The castle responded immediately. Torches dimmed slightly as they passed, their flames lowering into softer shapes, corridors smoothed ahead of them, corners rounding gently, making the walk feel longer and quieter than usual. The sounds of other students faded, not vanishing, but retreating into a comfortable distance. When they reached the corridor, it was unchanged. No candles floated along the walls, no glow warmed the stone. The bench sat beneath the window exactly as it always had, cool and still. For a moment, Harry wondered if they had come too late. Then the window changed, not opening this time, but reflecting. Instead of their faces, the glass showed faint images, blurred, overlapping, never settling into clarity. Students walking in pairs, teachers pausing at doorways, house banners stirring faintly, without wind. The images did not linger. They passed like thoughts drifting through a half-asleep mind. Hermione sat first. The bench warmed slowly, cautiously, as if recognizing her. Ron followed, then Harry, and the warmth spread evenly once more. Nothing else happened, and yet the suspense deepened, because this time the bench did not offer comfort alone. It offered anticipation. Harry felt it in the way the stone held its warmth, a fraction longer than before. Hermione sensed it in the way the window reflected not images, but possibilities. Ron felt it as a strange certainty that something was being prepared, not revealed. The castle was gathering itself. They sat for a long while, saying nothing. The silence felt layered, filled with echoes of conversations that had never been spoken here. Footsteps that had passed nearby without stopping. Students who had once felt drawn to this place, but never understood why. Finally, Hermione spoke, barely above a whisper. "It's not finished." "No," Harry agreed. Ron tilted his head. "Feels like it's building up to something, but not in a hurry." The bench warmed in agreement. When they left that night, the corridor felt different behind them. Not closed, not sealed, but attentive, like a book left open to the middle, waiting for the reader to return. As days passed, the subtle signs became more frequent. A bell rang 1 second later than expected. A feast paused mid-laughter, the sound softening as though wrapped in velvet. A teacher stopped mid-sentence, smiled faintly, then continued without knowing why. The castle was slowing itself down, not everywhere, just enough. The suspense did not sharpen, it deepened like water settling in a deep basin, growing stiller as it filled. Harry began to understand. This wasn't a mystery to be solved. It was a rhythm returning, a forgotten function of the castle waking gently, testing its edges, remembering how to breathe between moments. The bench was only one part of it. Something larger was unfolding, and Hogwarts, patient as ever, was taking its time, trusting that those who needed to notice would do so quietly when the moment was ready. The change in Hogwarts did not announce itself. It revealed itself slowly, in moments that felt chosen rather than accidental. Harry noticed that when he followed his instincts instead of the usual routes, the castle responded with an almost gentle approval. Corridors opened more easily, staircases settled sooner, even the air seemed warmer, as though the stone itself were pleased to be acknowledged. It was Hermione who first suggested that they stop waiting. "We keep noticing," she said one evening, as they walked beneath floating lanterns that glowed a little dimmer than usual. "But we haven't really explored, not properly." Ron frowned thoughtfully. "You mean poke around and see what happens?" Hermione smiled. "I mean listen, and then choose." That word, choose, lingered, so they began differently. Instead of following the pull of the bench directly, they allowed the castle to guide them elsewhere first. When a corridor felt longer than expected, they walked its full length. When a stair paused mid-shift, they waited with it. When a door creaked open just slightly, they did not force it wider, but stepped back and observed. The castle responded with quiet generosity. One afternoon, they discovered a narrow passage behind a tapestry Harry had walked past for years. It did not lead anywhere remarkable, just a small landing with a single arched window, but standing there felt important. The stone was smooth from hands long gone, and the window looked out onto nothing more than gray sky. Hermione traced the stone lightly. "This place doesn't want to be remembered for what it is," she murmured, "just that it exists." Ron nodded, "Like that bench." They did not linger. The moment felt complete, and so they left, trusting that they had done exactly what was required. Another time, they chose not to follow the pull at all. Harry felt it one night as they passed the corridor, a gentle tug, familiar now. But instead of turning, he paused. "What if we don't go yet?" The feeling did not resist. It softened. They continued on, and Harry realized something important then. The castle was not testing obedience. It was watching for awareness. Their choices mattered not because they unlocked something, but because they acknowledged it. As the days passed, the exploration became more intentional. Hermione began mapping feelings instead of passages, noting where the castle seemed calm, where it felt thoughtful, where it grew quiet in a way that felt deeper than silence. Ron noticed patterns too. "Places no one rushes through," he said. "That's where it happens." Harry listened, to footsteps echoing differently, to the way air shifted near old walls, to the subtle hum that seemed to run beneath everything. He had learned long ago that some magic did not announce itself with light or sound, but with a sense of being seen. Eventually, their exploration led them back, not because the bench called, but because the path felt complete. That night, the corridor felt wider. The bench waited, but this time, the window above it showed no images. Only stars, faint and distant, scattered across a sky that did not quite match the night outside. They sat. The warmth came more quickly now, settling beneath them like a shared breath. Hermione spoke first. I think we're meant to decide something. Ron shifted slightly. Doesn't feel like a test. No, Harry said. Feels like an invitation. They sat with that thought, letting it unfold gently. What if, Hermione said slowly, this place exists so the castle doesn't forget itself? Ron blinked. That's actually kind of brilliant. Harry felt the truth of it settle inside him. Hogwarts was not only halls and towers and classrooms. It was pauses, spaces between lessons, moments of waiting, places where nothing happened, and because of that, everything rested. The bench was not meant to be used, it was meant to be chosen. They understood then that the choice was not about staying longer or returning more often. It was about carrying the awareness with them, recognizing when to pause, when to listen, when not to rush the magic into usefulness. Hermione placed her hand on the bench. We don't tell anyone. It wasn't a rule, it was an understanding. Ron nodded. Doesn't need explaining. Harry felt a quiet certainty settle around them. The castle did not want witnesses. It wanted companions. They stayed a little longer, then stood together. As they did, the warmth faded gently, not withdrawing, but settling, like embers banked for later. When they left the corridor, it did not feel empty. It felt complete. From that night on, Hogwarts seemed calmer, not quieter, just more balanced. Bells rang on time again. Staircases behaved as expected. The pauses remained, but they felt intentional now, woven into the rhythm rather than interrupting it. Harry noticed something else too. When he chose to pause, to sit, to breathe, to wait, things often worked out better. Hermione found clarity more easily in her studies. Ron laughed more, lighter somehow, and Harry felt less pulled by urgency, more guided by presence. The exploration had not revealed a hidden chamber or ancient artifact. It had revealed a way of being, and Hogwarts, content once more, continued to stand, old, patient, and quietly grateful that someone still knew how to listen. The realization did not arrive all at once. It unfolded gently, like a page turning on its own, revealing words that had always been there, but were only now ready to be read. It began on a night when the castle felt especially still, not asleep. Hogwarts never truly slept, but attentive. The corridors were quiet in a way that felt deliberate, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Harry noticed it first as he lay awake in his dormitory, staring at the faint glow of moonlight tracing patterns across the ceiling. There was no pull this time, no tug drawing him toward the corridor. Instead, there was a sense of readiness. The next evening, he shared the feeling with Hermione and Ron, and neither of them seemed surprised. I think, Hermione said carefully, we've reached the part where the castle tells us why. Ron swallowed. Why what? Why the bench exists? Why it waited so long? They didn't rush. They let the day pass naturally, attended classes, laughed at dinner, listened to the gentle clatter of plates in the great hall. When night finally arrived, they walked together, not guided by instinct alone, but by a shared understanding that this moment would not repeat itself in the same way. The corridor welcomed them quietly. The lanterns burned lower than usual, their light soft and golden. The bench waited as it always had, but something about it felt different tonight, less like an object, more like a presence finally ready to speak. They sat. The warmth came slowly, spreading not just beneath them, but around them, as though the space itself were closing its arms in a careful embrace. Above, the window did not show stars, nor sky, nor scenes from other times. It showed the corridor itself, not as it was now, but as it had been. They watched in silence as the stone brightened, smoothing into younger lines. The air filled with faint echoes, footsteps, laughter, whispers carried on long-forgotten drafts. Students passed through the corridor, some pausing briefly, some leaning against the wall, some sitting on the bench. The bench had not always been unused. Hermione's breath caught softly. It was ordinary. Ron frowned. Then why did everyone stop? The image shifted. Years passed in moments. The corridor grew quieter. The bench remained, but fewer students noticed it. The castle expanded, rearranged, adjusted to new needs and new generations. Staircases learned new paths. Corridors learned to wait. And slowly, without malice or intention, this place was left behind. Not hidden, just forgotten. Harry felt something tighten in his chest. Not sadness exactly, but recognition. The castle didn't lose it, he whispered. People did. The warmth deepened, responding to his words. Hermione's voice trembled slightly. Hogwarts changes because it listens, but it also remembers, even when we don't. The window showed the final shift. The bench remained untouched. The corridor dimmed, settling into quiet. But the space did not vanish. It waited for centuries, not for a hero, not for a chosen one, for awareness. The image faded, and the window returned to darkness, reflecting only their own faces now, older than the students they had seen, but young enough still to understand what was being asked. Ron broke the silence. So, it wasn't abandoned. No, Hermione said softly. It was preserved. Harry felt the insight settle fully then, clear and gentle as dawn. The bench was not magical in the way wands or spells were magical. It did not grant power. It did not alter fate. It existed to hold something far quieter and far more fragile, stillness. The castle had created places like this not as secrets, but as anchors, spaces where time slowed, where the rush of learning, growing, striving could ease its grip. When such places were forgotten, Hogwarts adapted, but something essential went unvisited until now. The warmth around them shifted again, not brighter, but steadier. The castle was no longer showing them its past. It was acknowledging its present. Hermione closed her eyes. We weren't meant to fix anything. Ron nodded slowly. Just notice. Harry understood the final truth then, fully, and without resistance. Magic did not always need to be used. Sometimes it needed to be witnessed. The bench had waited because it had to. The moment could not be forced. Only when someone chose to sit, not out of need, not out of curiosity, but out of presence, could the balance return. Hogwarts had not been broken. It had been incomplete. And now, quietly, it was whole again. The warmth began to fade, not because the moment was ending, but because it had been fulfilled. The corridor felt lighter, as though a long-held tension had finally eased. Hermione placed her palm against the stone wall. It's done. Ron exhaled slowly. Yeah, feels like it. Harry remained seated a moment longer, letting the insight settle into something lasting. He knew they would remember this, not as a story to tell, but as a way of moving through the world. They stood together, the bench remained, unchanged and unremarkable to any passerby. The corridor looked as it always had. No marks, no signs, no lingering glow, and yet everything was different. As they walked away, Harry felt the castle watching, not in gratitude, not in judgment, but in quiet companionship. Hogwarts would continue to shift and grow as it always had, but now it remembered that stillness mattered, and so did they. They did not hurry away from the corridor. There was no reason to rush now. Whatever had needed to happen had already settled into place, like dust drifting gently back onto a shelf after a long disturbance. The bench remained behind them, quiet and ordinary once more, yet Harry could still feel its presence, not calling, not glowing, simply existing as it was meant to. The walk back through the castle felt different, not brighter, not louder, just softer. Their footsteps echoed faintly along the stones, slower than before, as though the corridors themselves had decided to match their pace. Portraits dozed in their frames, murmuring in half-remembered dreams. A suit of armor shifted slightly as they passed, metal whispering against metal, then settling again into silence. Ron yawned, the tension finally draining from his shoulders. I didn't even realize how tired I was. Hermione smiled, her voice low and peaceful. That's what happens when you stop listening for answers and start listening for quiet. Harry didn't speak right away. He was noticing the way his breath felt steadier, deeper, as though the castle had gently reminded him how to rest. The weight he often carried, expectation, memory, vigilance, had loosened, not vanished, but softened into something manageable. They climbed the stairs together, the moving steps unusually cooperative tonight, gliding into place without their usual hesitation. It felt like a courtesy, or perhaps a thank you, though the castle never said such things out loud. When they reached their common room, the fire burned low, embers glowing like sleepy stars. Most of the armchairs were empty, blankets folded neatly over their backs. The room hummed with a warmth that had nothing to do with heat alone. Hermione paused near the hearth. I think we don't need to go back. Ron nodded immediately. Yeah, feels like one of those things you don't revisit, not because you can't, just because you don't have to. Harry understood exactly what he meant. Some moments were meant to remain complete. They said goodnight quietly, voices barely above whispers, and headed toward their dormitories. Harry climbed into bed, the curtains falling closed around him with a soft, familiar swish. Outside, the wind brushed against the tower windows, not howling, not demanding entry, just passing by. As he lay there, he thought of the bench again, not with curiosity this time, but with gratitude. It would still be there tomorrow, and the day after, and long after they had moved on to other things. Students would continue to pass the corridor without noticing it, and that was all right. The bench did not need attention to exist. It only needed to be remembered once in a while. Harry's eyes grew heavy. Images drifted through his thoughts. Not visions, not magic, just quiet impressions. A student pausing to rest, a laugh echoing briefly, then fading. A moment of stillness between lessons and obligations. Hogwarts was full of grand spaces and dramatic moments, but it was these smaller places, these pauses between events, that held everything together. The castle knew this, and now so did he, his breathing slowed, matching the gentle rhythm of the night. Somewhere far below, the corridors rested, the bench waited, not expectantly, not patiently, but peacefully, as though time itself had learned to sit beside it. Tomorrow would come with classes and chatter and moving staircases that refused to cooperate. There would be challenges, questions, and the steady march forward that came with growing up. But tonight was for rest. The fire crackled once, softly, then settled. The wind eased. The tower stood watch, as it always had, ancient and steady beneath the stars. Harry drifted toward sleep, with the comforting knowledge that Hogwarts did not demand constant bravery or brilliance. Sometimes, simply being present was enough. And as the castle settled into its deepest quiet, every stone seemed to agree. And so, as the night continued its slow and careful journey across the sky, Hogwarts rested. The towers stood calm beneath the stars, their windows glowing faintly like half-closed eyes. The corridors no longer shifted or whispered. Even the moving staircases seemed content to remain where they were, as though the castle itself had decided that nothing more needed to happen tonight. Inside the dormitory, Harry slept peacefully. His dreams were quiet ones, soft impressions rather than stories. The warmth of the common room fire, the steady presence of stone walls that had watched over countless students before him, the sense that he was not alone and never truly had been. Hogwarts had a way of holding its students even while they slept. It remembered their footsteps, their laughter, their worries, and their hopes. And when the day had been long or the world felt heavy, the castle knew how to offer something gentler in return. A pause, a breath, a place to simply be. The bench until the forgotten corridor remained exactly where it belonged, bathed in quiet shadows. It did not glow. It did not call out. It waited in the way only something timeless can, without expectation, without urgency, ready for anyone who might one day need a moment of stillness. But for now, there was nothing left to do. The night wrapped itself around the castle like a soft blanket. The wind outside softened to a whisper. Somewhere, an owl shifted on its perch, feathers rustling gently before settling again. If you are listening to this story as your own eyes begin to feel heavy, know that it is all right to rest. You do not need to solve anything tonight. You do not need to be anywhere else. Like the castle, you are allowed to be quiet for a while. Let your thoughts slow one by one, like footsteps fading down a distant corridor. Let the weight of the day loosen its grip. There is time for everything else later. For now, there is only this calm moment. Hogwarts watches, the night holds, steady, and sleep arrives gently, exactly when it is ready. Wherever your dreams take you, May they be warm, peaceful, and kind. And as the castle drifts deeper into silence, this tale closes softly, leaving you safe, unhurried, and wrapped in rest.